Alrighty. Starting the night off with a little bit of a taste test of a creation again. And warming up for the night with a little bit of a snack. This is what I do with Hershey's Kiss cereal. I have basically made a Rice Krispie treat, but instead of Rice Krispies, I'm using Hershey's Kiss chocolate cereal. So chocolate and marshmallow. And then I have a little container of a cookie butter, which is essentially a spreadable graham cracker paste. So graham cracker, chocolate, and marshmallow. These are more cookie bars. The cereal was okay, but I think this is the right use for it. I didn't use a double boiler for my marshmallow for making the cookie treats. So they did get a little which is fine. It's not a huge problem. But I will say, cookie butter is something I don't usually go for. Like I said, it's a spreadable graham cracker paste. It's not my favorite thing in the world. But it works for this use. All right, so as I munch away here, we've sort of run the basics on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles setting that we did last night and then before. So we kind of got where we're going with that one. There's not a lot of more to be done other than the actual writing, which is something I like to leave to the individual writers. I know what I'm going to do with it. I'd love to see what other people want to do with it. Interesting that I refer to some of those things as flavors when I'm so fond of doing food experiments. But yeah, so it's sort of like we've set the groundwork. We've built the playground. Really. Your connection is unstable. Please wait while we try to reconnect. Do you actively wait for me to do that, YouTube? You pop up that notice telling me that pop up the notice to tell me my connection is failing. And you don't go away until I say it out loud. I don't know if that's a problem or what. And I don't know how much of this is going to disappear now. But that aside, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story that we disassembled up as sort of the ghosts of children hunted by vampires is really where we started from. And taken under the wing by taken under wing. I guess we should probably say taken under branch by some dryads. Who gave them tree-based augmentation so that they could become Monster Hunter champions. It's a pretty straightforward storyline. It's also very different from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so that if you were to give somebody that synopsis and ask them where you think where they think you got the idea, they probably wouldn't be able to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that's kind of the fun of doing this. And by this, I mean tonight's adventure in reworking Ghostbusters. So, starting with Ghostbusters, the premise that we should probably do, this should be the way I do it from now on. I should try to remember to give a summary of what the original franchise is. So in this case, Ghostbusters is a sort of science fiction, supernatural comedy. Above all else, it's meant to be a comedy. But I don't think that's where we're going to go with this. Maybe we could go there with it. I don't know. We'll think about that. But Ghostbusters is a story about three guys. I'm trying to remember it correctly. I mean, I haven't seen the female cast Ghostbusters, so I don't know how they changed any of that. But in the original Ghostbusters, it was a supernatural scientist and his friend who's just a womanizing jerk for the most part. He's a good con man. He's a cynic and a bit of a jerk. And then the third person would be the Egon character. And Egon is sort of the supernatural scientist. Or he's more the engineer. Ray is the scientist. He's into the science of it. And Peter, is that his name? Peter Venkman, yes. Peter Venkman is more of the showbiz guy, the face of the group. And they get themselves involved in trying to uncover the supernatural. And when they actually do, when they find something that actually is a keystone event that is changing their world, so that something happening in the background, so secret and fringe that most people don't accept that it's a real thing, starts to become so openly a real thing that they can actually start a business in dealing with it and market on their sort of supposed expertise in the field from years of experimenting in it. And so you have a bunch of fringe researchers whose fringe is becoming mainstream, and therefore their expertise becomes valuable in it. So in this case, the story is about ghosts. I feel like we could go in a slightly different direction. And I'm pretty sure the last time I redid this one, the last time we did redid Ghostbusters was we did cryptids or something like that. Aliens and cryptids and whatever. I think this time what I'd like to do is I kind of want to play in the playground of superheroes. But in a maybe not like a full-blown superhero setting. Because it's an important factor of the Ghostbusters that they start out as paranormal investigators in the realm of spiritual events. And their exploration of that area is something that would otherwise be used to label them as quacks and flim-flam artists. And at least for Peter Venkman, he genuinely is a flim flam artist. He's there to use the showmanship to make his work seem like it's a real thing. But if we're going to do a story about people with special abilities, like the Ghostbusters were about ghosts, then maybe not going at it from the perspective of tights and cape wearing superheroes, but instead moving into the direction of people who display unusual powers. This is starting to make me think a little bit of the movie Push, where there is sort of an underground for people with unusual abilities, but it doesn't seem to be quite a public awareness. Ooh, I'm really starting to kind of like this idea. So we start with I don't know if we want to go with changing the number of people again. Maybe not. I think 2 or 3 would work. If you do 2, it gets a little too X-Files. If you go 5 or 6, maybe we could go 5 or 6. Because what I'm thinking happens here is I would like to kind of establish them as sort of the... I don't want to call them a but they would be essentially setting themselves up like that. I don't know. It's like a I don't want to call them mercenaries either, but that's sort of what they are. They would be the people who come in. You hire them to come in to solve the problem of something going on in your neighborhood. When something strange. Yeah, so basically, yeah, I'm trying to remember the song for the Ghostbusters. So when something strange is going on in your neighborhood, who are you going to call? But in this case, the strange isn't ghosts. It's a sort of people with strange abilities showing up in the neighborhood or the region that you're in. So you have sort of like, if you go perusing through, and sometimes the internet is a beautiful place to peruse for weird ideas. If you go looking through YouTube and you look up real superpowers or something to that effect, there are people out there who post videos on YouTube pretty regularly of like edited clips or things that show people who shouldn't be able to do the things they do, as if they're proof of super abilities. So you'll have a picture of somebody who gets struck by lightning 4 times in a row. And really what it is it's a footage of a man who stumbles drunkenly down a street. And somebody has edited in a lightning strike each time he falls down. But the idea that there's somebody who can not only attract lightning, but survive its strike is something that they're touting as this amazing person who has this strange thing happen to them. You also have some of those videos where something glitched in a camera somewhere and somebody's crossing a street and the street looks clear, but then you notice that a truck is coming through the intersection and the person standing in front of the truck disappears from where they are and appears at a different location on the street, as if they've teleported out of the way of the truck. It's just glitching in the video, or editing on the part of somebody who wants to make it look like there's somebody with powers. So there are clips like that all over the internet, and nobody's really following up on it, but there are some fringe believers in that sort of thing. And so what I think would be kind of fun is have those fringe believers believe in those abilities and investigate and explore and try to test to find out where those abilities might come from and if they can be triggered or find them or whatever. And with that sort of fringe stuff happening, have an incident that triggers more people to actually start manifesting abilities. And when they start manifesting abilities like that, you start to develop this idea of, you need to call somebody who can come in and solve the problems that this would cause if more people were suddenly developing these strange abilities. So with that premise, you have these quacks exploring these fringe things, suddenly being consulted because they're experts. But in the vein of Ghostbusters, they're called in not for their scientific opinion on this phenomenon. They're called in to fix it or resolve the problem, and they engineer ghost traps and proton packs as a means of wrangling ghosts. Some equivalent for power dampeners or shackles that can hold a super strong person or things like that have to be engineered as a way to potentially protect people from superpowered crooks or angry teenage violence with superpowers involved. That sort of thing where, like, you have these four mundane people who have been studying some of this stuff long enough that they have some inkling of how these things work, or at least how to potentially manage the circumstances in which they're occurring. And they're showing up to be sort of like hired security to address something going on in a community. I think that's sort of the way I want to go with this. Okay, so the question is, do we go with the same tropes of who the characters are? So we start out with Egon Spengler, who's the engineer. And we have Ray. I can't even remember Ray's last name. And he's the scientist, the one with all the high theories and explanations for how things work. And then you have the face man, who is Peter Venkman. So how do you turn some of those tropes around? Oh, how do you do that? Okay, so instead of like just mysterious science, would we want to do something more practical? So instead of proton packs where you don't cross the stream or to cause a nuclear reaction or something like that, do we go more practical with that? Do we go along the lines of, you've encountered somebody with supernatural abilities that perhaps occur somewhere in a certain region of the brain? And so if you do a directed electromagnetic beam, it'll do what directed magnetic therapies can do something to a human brain and cause or ease depression or that kind of thing. Or do you do sonic? There's the sort of like the sonic vibrations can sort of rattle you enough that you unable to focus, and that could distort the problem? Or do you just out and out say that they have some kooky things and some of them work, but they don't know exactly why? And do you have that Peter Venkman character? That character who is sort of a slime wad, but a necessary addition to the team to make it work? So like a Peter Venkman would be a Steve Jobs, almost more of an Elon Musk, honestly. Who's a bit of a frat boy jerk sometimes. I don't know. I feel like that type of character is really hard to deal with. And one of the things we can always do when we have a character whose type is problematic in the current time frame is just switch one of the major factors of them. So, like a Peter Venkman character swapping over to a female character. No. What we need to do is swap Ray for a female character. One of those, you know him and I know him. It's sort of offensive to talk about it like this, but there's that certain type of woman who believes in rubbing essential oil of cabbage on the soles of your feet on the night of a new moon to cure yourself of Lyme disease or some stupid crap like that. Some new agey bullshit. And I think we need that kind of comedically funny, like, shit shouldn't work. And that they should be ridiculed for being so absurdist. But it kind of begs that if they're right on occasion, that it's just kind of like, oh, now they're going to be insufferable about everything. That would be so fun. I think that would be the fun way to go. And have an Egon character, somebody who can... Oh, I feel like I want to make like a redneck Egon. Like the kind of person who can hook up a generator in the trunk, wire a household air conditioner through the back window of a sedan, and have an air-conditioned interior to a car by running it that way. Like, you put junk together to do things that shouldn't work together, but you make it work. Oh, golly. So that would be like, that would be your Egon character. And your Venkman character, again, the problematic character on that one. Do you go with a charming guy who shouldn't be charming and gets away with it? I almost feel like we want to get away from having that Venkman character. Bill Murray's a great actor. He's done some great comedy stuff. But I feel like that Venkman character is a problem for this. The Winston character is the sort of hired on person who's to Earth. He's the stand-in for the audience. He's the one who's like, this stuff is weird, but it's part of my job to deal with it. I feel like you could start the story with the soccer mom weirdo, the new age soccer mom, and the redneck engineer, and add in, because they've made a sort of a career out of exploring these things, like an intern, like the intern, the one who's most like mentally stable, looking at these two and go, oh dear God. But in the end, they're the most dependable and self-aware person in that original trilogy. But who do you get to be the public face? Who do you get to be the public face of that group? That public face is a very important one. I almost want to make it like the intern's mom. That wouldn't be quite appropriate. See, this is going in the direction of doing this comedically. And when I first started playing with this idea tonight, are we losing minutes of content tonight? If we're losing minutes, I'm going to be very upset. But if we go with the comedic concept, we can go with the route we're going on right now. The less comedic way that you could do this is a very almost X-Files approach. So if we did something a little bit more serious, you do have a sort of group of hired security. Trying to think what the equivalent would be in the movies or the comics. There's sort of like occasionally in the Marvel cinematic universe, it would sort of be S.H.I.E.L.D. That's a huge organization, and what we don't want is a huge organization. We want sort of a ragtag team whose job it is to go out there and solve these unusual circumstances of people with powers doing damage or causing problems. And in that case, you would start with people who had been studying these things, very Scully, studying these things seriously, and not take that sort of crystals and essential oils mother character and the redneck engineer. You wouldn't necessarily have those paths. You would go a little bit more in the line of like a blogger, like a webcaster who's been studying these fringe cases for a long time, and they have an audience. Ooh, this is getting sticky though. I'm a little squicky on this because the thing we're dealing with in this case isn't ghosts, not malignant spirits of some mischievous something or other, but people and trying to capture them. It gets a little weird with that, though. I mean, you have to walk a very fine line to make sure you're illustrating that these are dangerous people that need to be not necessarily killed or imprisoned, but brought into a situation where you're doing it to protect society and even some of those same people from themselves. That's very authoritarian, and it's a very risky move to make in a storytelling. But it sounds like an interesting challenge to do it right. I mean, there are examples of it where it makes sense in the story. Where, like, we know that it could be dangerous and that it makes sense to help the people who could become dangerous not harm their friends, their family, and their community, and have somebody there who can be called in to intervene where things look like they're going too far south. I don't know. I don't know which direction to go with this. So I'm going to have to contemplate this a little bit tonight. I'm going to call it at 35 minutes tonight. I want to see if it actually recorded 35 minutes or if it stopped 5 minutes in and just disappeared. But I think this is sort of the direction I want to go forward with this. With the idea of doing the serious. I could just draft up for tomorrow a rough run through for the comedic and the serious approach to this. I think I'll probably just see if I can come up with one for each of those approaches and see which one I like the most come tomorrow. Because I have to admit that the comedic approach sounds a lot more fun. But the serious one sounds a lot more thought-provoking. All right, so I'm going to say for now, I'm all set for the night. Hopefully this actually recorded and posted to YouTube. If it didn't, I'm going to be very upset. But until then, I will say thanks for joining me for tonight. I will catch you tomorrow night. And until then, take care and have a good night. And I think I do not have that on the cut and paste floor right now. So I'm going to have to go out and copy and paste. And take care and have a good night. I will catch you on the morrow. So that says 34 minutes and 27 seconds.